Lost in the dark, the horror of deep space exploration in the darkest corner of the universe, where no human eye had ever ventured, there existed a void so deep that even light feared to enter. The cold was suffocating, a silence that made even the most hardened astronauts uneasy. Beyond the visible stars and planets, beyond the galaxies humans had barely begun to comprehend, lay the true terror of space, an unfathomable emptiness that seemed to stretch forever. But for the brave, or perhaps foolish, few who dared to explore this vast unknown, a different reality awaited. It was a reality that would leave them questioning not only their sanity, but the very nature of existence itself. The mission had begun as any other. A crew of 7 astronauts aboard the spacecraft Endurance had been selected for a groundbreaking expedition to explore a distant star system, one that was situated in the farthest reaches of our galaxy. The journey would take years, but the promise of discovery was enough to motivate even the most experienced crew members to venture into the void. The captain, Robert Hayes, had been to space before. He had spent decades flying missions and had seen things that most people would never believe. But this mission was different. It wasn't just about exploring new planets or gathering data. It was about pushing the boundaries of human understanding, going further than any human had ever gone. They were to explore a star system located in a part of the galaxy where no radio signals had ever been received, where no telescopes had ever been able to peer. As the Endurance soared through the blackness of space, the crew settled into their routine. The ship's AI, a highly advanced system named Elysium, handled most of the navigation and communication, leaving the crew to focus on their physical and mental well-being. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and the silence of space seemed to close in on them. There was no sound in space, and the absence of noise made everything feel eerily distant, as though the universe itself was holding its breath. One day, just after they had crossed the threshold of the unknown star system, something strange happened. The ship's sensors began to malfunction. At first, it was minor glitches, a flicker on the screen here and there, but soon, the glitches became more frequent. Instruments that had been perfectly calibrated began to produce readings that made no sense. Gravity fluctuated in small, almost imperceptible waves, and the stars outside the windows began to behave erratically, flickering like the glow of dying fireflies. Captain Hayes called a meeting. "This is beyond any anomaly I've seen before," he said, staring at the malfunctioning screens. "We've crossed into a part of space where the laws of physics seem questionable. Could it be a mistake?" Lieutenant Ava Malik asked. She was the ship's science officer, and her calm demeanor did little to mask the unease in her voice. "I don't think so," Hayes replied. "This is something else." The crew was on edge, and the atmosphere in the control room grew tense. The situation grew worse as the days passed. The ship's external cameras began to show strange distortions. At first, it was just a faint blur in the images. But as they moved deeper into the star system, the images grew more disturbing. The stars appeared to twist and warp, as if they were not solid, but made of liquid light, flowing and bending in ways that defied logic. Then, one night, it happened. The lights in the ship flickered, and the hum of the engines faltered. Everyone aboard the Endurance felt a sudden, deep shiver run down their spines as the entire ship seemed to shudder. The crew scrambled to their stations, but nothing could explain the sudden disturbance. Captain Hayes stared out the viewing port, watching in horror as the stars outside began to twist in on themselves, collapsing into spirals that defied any known pattern. The images from the external cameras became almost unwatchable, distorting so severely that the ship's AI was unable to compensate. "I think we need to turn back," Malik said, her voice tight with fear. "This place, it's not right." But it was too late. The systems on the ship began to fail one by one. First, the navigation controls went dark. Then, the life support systems began to flicker, the oxygen levels dropping ever so slightly, though no one could figure out why. The artificial gravity began to fluctuate wildly, throwing the crew off balance. There was no explanation for any of it. Over the following days, more crew members began to report strange visions. Captain Hayes had never been one to believe in superstitions, but even he couldn't ignore the bizarre occurrences. He began to hear whispers in the corridors, low, unintelligible murmurs that seemed to come from nowhere. Malik was the first to mention it. "I keep seeing things," she said, her face pale. "Shadows, things moving out of the corner of my eye. But when I look, there's nothing there." The ship's communication system went dead. No messages could be sent to Earth. No signals could be received. It was as if the Endurance was trapped in a pocket of space, where the rules of communication and physics simply didn't apply. Then, the worst of it happened. On the 5th day of their isolation, Lieutenant Malik vanished. She had been in the control room, working on recalibrating the ship's sensors. When the rest of the crew checked on her, her station was empty. There was no sign of a struggle, no evidence that she had left. The door to the control room was still sealed, but Malik was gone, as though she had simply been erased. Panic set in. The crew searched the ship from bow to stern, checking every cabin, every hallway, and every air vent. They found no trace of her. It was as if Malik had never existed. Even her personal belongings, her clothes, her datapad, everything was gone. Only the silence remained, thick and suffocating. Captain Hayes ordered the crew to gather in the mess hall. "This doesn't make sense," he said, his voice cracked with tension. "Malik didn't just disappear. Something is happening here, and we need to figure out what it is before it happens to one of us." But before anyone could respond, the lights flickered again, this time accompanied by a strange, low rumble that seemed to come from within the very walls of the ship. The hum of the engine stopped, replaced by a cold, dead silence. The temperature in the room dropped dramatically, and their breath became visible in the freezing air. Then, something even more terrifying occurred. A voice, soft but unmistakable, came over the intercom system. "Why are you here?" It was a voice unlike any they had ever heard. Not human, yet strangely familiar. It wasn't coming from any of them, yet it felt as though it were coming from within the ship itself. "Who are you?" Hayes shouted into the empty room, but there was no answer. The crew tried everything they could think of. They tried to power up the engines, to send a distress signal, to break through the walls of the ship, but nothing worked. They were trapped in the heart of a star system that had become something else, something unnatural. Days turned into weeks, and the crew began to unravel. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. Sometimes they would hear them coming from the walls. Other times, they would hear the voice of Lieutenant Malik, calling out to them, begging for help, though they knew she was gone. And then, one by one, they began to vanish. There's no escape. The dark emptiness of space has never felt so suffocating. In the end, it's not the vastness of the universe that's terrifying, it's what lies hidden within it. Their story is still a mystery. What happened to them? In the dark void, it's still a mystery. For more mysterious and terrifying stories, subscribe our channel and become a part of Universal Infactus. Till the next time, goodbye.